Teach and Learn series today. My name is Amber Schiltz. I am the Interim Division Administrator of the Fish and Wildlife Education Division here in Nebraska Game and Parks. And today we are going to be learning about connecting communities to urban biodiversity. And we're really excited to hear about this topic. It's very timely and relative, especially with some exciting events coming up in the next month. So I'm just gonna give it over to you, Alie. Alie's gonna be our presenter today. She's a community science specialist here in the Fish and Wildlife Education Division. And I guess, oh, sorry, Alie, before I do pass it along to her, if you have questions or thoughts or comments throughout the presentation, please put them in the chat. Alie mentioned she's open to taking those questions as we move along. We'll have some discussions also at the end for a discussion questions. And if she mentions any fantastic resources or things like that today, just know I will send out a follow-up email afterwards. It will include the recording to this, it will include an evaluation, and also any resources she sends along with her contact information. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Alie. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome. Thank you, Amber. So welcome, everybody. We're going to be talking about connecting communities to urban biodiversity, the what, the why, and the how. So yes, my name is Alie Mays, and I'm the Community Science Education Specialist here at Game and Parks in the Fish and Wildlife Education Division. I have an undergrad in ecology, and then I have a master's in education focused on teaching biological sciences and specifically community science in Nebraska. So I just wanted to kind of set the stage first. So our urban areas, so 73% of Nebraskans live in urban areas. Around estimated 68% of those are in the Lincoln or Omaha metro area. So not just Omaha, but those surrounding cities, the suburbs, are included in that number as well. The UN estimates that 55% of people globally live in an urban area currently, and then that projection, or that's projected to rise to 68% by 2050. And then just another note to throw out there, 58% of Americans spend 30 minutes or less in nature or outside a day. So why are those numbers important? Our urban areas provide an opportunity to teach environmental processes and conservation to large numbers of people, including those who lack the means or motivation to travel to non-urban areas where exposure-based education has been located traditionally. So we have this huge audience in urban areas, and we also have urban biodiversity. So really quickly, can you throw in the chat, what do you think urban biodiversity is? All right, so we have some answers coming in. All organisms in urban areas, those species tolerant of humans, wildlife in and around cities, an array of cities that persist in developed areas, lots of species. I think all of those are really hitting the point. So urban biodiversity is talking about the variety of life within urban areas, or at least that's the definition we're going to go with for today's presentation. So as these areas grow, these urban areas, and we're finding nature in these urban areas and finding better ways to coexist with our urban wildlife and plants, it's going to become more and more important to study this urban biodiversity. So we're going to talk today more specifically, though, about how we connect people to urban nature. And we're going to go through kind of three things. So we're going to go through providing place-based programs. I'm going to talk about one of the programs we do here in the Fish and Wildlife Education Division, and then how to encourage the discovery of urban biodiversity through citizen science or community science. And then we're going to talk about celebrating urban nature, so getting ourselves and other people really excited about those species that we coexist with. Any questions right now before we move on? Okay. So talking first about providing those place-based educational programs. So place-based learning, you can think of as education using the process of local communities and the environment as a starting place to teach concepts. And so we believe that's really important. That's a lot of what we do here in our division. We like to teach about nature, teach about science through those Nebraska specific examples. And so when we're planning our place-based educational programs for urban audiences and for emphasizing urban biodiversity, we want to emphasize that the urban nature where people live. We want to increase their comfort in spending time in nature, and we want to reduce the idea that nature is always somewhere that we visit and then leave. We want to think of nature more as something we're a part of even in our urban settings. So the program I want to specifically talk about is our program with Girls Inc. out of Omaha. And Amber's been very involved with this program as well. So she might speak up if I forget any points or have anything else to add. So Girls Inc. is an organization that prepares girls for the world by providing opportunities and experiences that amplify their voices, build leadership skills, encourage risk-taking, and celebrate all-around fierceness. I really like their statement there. And when we started this partnership with Girls Inc., it was about two or 3 years ago now that we started. We really started with a conversation. So we put that partner up in the forefront of the planning. We planned with them, not for them. And so it started with conversations. We got to know them and their goals so that we could help them meet those goals and meet our own goals and at the same time, right? So we were very intentional in that planning process. So we have done school time programs, so we clubs with this group before, but our big focus is summer programming, and we tend to do it in sessions. So those sessions are 2 to 4 days. They tend to be around 3 days, and during the summertime, and we like to really start at the Girls Inc. location. So they have a location in Omaha, and they have programs that they do all the time with the girls, like their gardening program that they do, or they have some bee programs that they do. And so we try to find ways to really tie in what they're doing already into our programs to expand on those things. So we like to start at the facility. So if we're doing a 3-day program, the first day will definitely be at Girls Inc. And so that's kind of setting the stage in an area they're comfortable with. We might go outside, into the surrounding, their yard or their garden, that sort of thing. But we start there before we expand outward. And then to build off of it, we'll go to a local area. So it might look like going to the park down the road. It might look like going to another place in Omaha, like the botanical garden. So somewhere that is in their neighborhood or their city that they can return to at some point if they wanted to, right? And so this would be the next step. So we start at their location, then we go the next step, going to a local area, building on whatever concept it is, maybe the theme is birds or pollinators or whatever it is. We find ways to tie that into local areas. And then last, we like to go even further out and taking them maybe to a nearby state park. So we've taken them to Schramm before, we've taken them to Platte River and have an immersive experience there. But we like to center it around their neighborhood and their place before we expand it out, if that makes sense. Amber, did you have anything you wanted to add with that?
I don't think so. You definitely covered it, and it's something that this is one of the first programs that we've really, as a team, been as intentional as we could in that, like what you mentioned, that co-creation of this program. And I think that has helped the success in the return kind of relationship, and that intentionality of starting where they are with that comfort level and then moving them outwards has been really cool to kind of watch evolve over the years. And my understanding is we'll be doing a really similar thing this summer with them too. So that relationship keeps building and expanding, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, and in addition, we're also expanding it even further in another program that we'll talk about in a little bit. Okay, so now we're going to move to the second point. So using community science to discover urban biodiversity. And the program I wanted to focus on for this is the City Nature Challenge. One, because it happens in cities all over the state and all over the globe, but also because it's about to happen. So anyone is welcome to jump in on this program and participate. It's a really fun time finding and focusing around urban biodiversity. So the City Nature Challenge is an international community science initiative in which participants engage in documenting the natural environment surrounding their home cities by submitting observations of species via iNaturalist. And so just to back up a little bit, what's community science if you're not familiar with that? So community science is the meaningful involvement of volunteers in research projects. And community science is really special and unique, at least in my mind, because it is this balance between education and engagement and that rigorous usable science and data collection. And so the City Nature Challenge itself has 5 goals: to connect people to their local nature in urban and metro areas, to connect people to each other, so building that community both in person and online, specifically around local nature, and then to collect urban biodiversity data that are available to managers and scientists, grow volunteer biodiversity documentation globally, and have fun through some friendly competition or collaboration. So the City Nature Challenge, just to back up, it's organized globally by the California Academy of Sciences and the Los Angeles Natural History Museum. It started as a competition between those 2 organizations. And they were like, wouldn't it be fun if we just competed to see which city could find the most biodiversity in our urban areas? And it's since grown from those 2 cities in 2018 to over, I think it was 445 cities in 2022 across the globe. So it's really taken off and expanded. It's really cool to see. So the City Nature Challenge itself is split into 2 parts. The first part is the observation period. So this is from April 28th to May 1st. And so this is when people are invited to go out, find observations of living things. This can be plants, animals, fungi, lichen, insects, and then we ask them to take a picture of it. So take a picture on your cell phone or your camera, and just make sure you have, if your location is on your phone, that's great. That's an easy way to make sure you have that location information. Otherwise, just remember where you took the picture so you can make sure when you upload it or share it to iNaturalist, you're able to input that information. The next part is the identification period. So it's really, really fun to go out for 4 days and find as much nature as you can in your urban environments. But then you have this huge tasks of identifying everything that you find. So identification is just as important as finding the observations themselves. So we have May 2nd through May 7th to do as many of these identifications as we can. Nebraska has 5 participating areas. So we have the Omaha metro area. That one is organized by Omaha Zoo. And then the next 4 are organized by Game and Parks. So Lincoln, Lancaster County, Norfolk, Madison County, and North Platte, Lincoln County. And then Scottsbluff County is organized in partnership with Bird Conservancy of the Rockies. So this is great that we have so many cities throughout the state participating. If you're in a participating city, it's really easy. You just upload your observations to iNaturalist. That's it. As long as you're within one of those areas, your observations automatically upload. However, if you're not in a participating city, you can still participate by joining this global, the global project for the City Nature Challenge. And so you would just go on to iNaturalist, join the project, and then your observations count no matter where you are in the state or the world. So last year in 2022, we had over 3,000 observations taken during the City Nature Challenge. Over 300 people helped identify those observations, over 200 made the observations, and over 800 species, almost 900 species were identified during the 2022 CNC. So it was a great effort. And if you look at it globally, there were, I think it was 1.6 or 1.7 million observations worldwide. So this is really helping to generate quite a lot of biodiversity data in our urban areas. The City Nature Challenge also has a huge learning component, teaching component as well. So they did a survey of participants last year, and 95% reported to have learned something new about animals or plants in their local area, which is really important. And then 50% learned something new about the threats to animals and plants in their area. And 73% have learned more about the organizations or projects working to monitor and protect those plants and animals. So it's a great opportunity to teach people about the local wildlife and the local conservation efforts and work being done in their areas. So before we continue on to celebrating urban nature, does anybody have questions about the City Nature Challenge?
Alie, how were the results last year in 2022 in participating cities compared to the previous years? Is it true that we gained cities across Nebraska, and what does that trend look like? Are more cities wanting to be participating in this?
Yeah, so you can see, are you talking about just in Nebraska or
Sure,
in?
yeah,
Okay,
mainly in
sure.
Nebraska.
If you look at this slide very closely at the bottom right-hand corner, you can see how it's grown through the years.
Oh, cool. Okay.
However, in Nebraska specifically, it started actually with Omaha, the Omaha Zoo, coordinating the Omaha Metro. And I think they were going on for a year or two before we started here in Lincoln. So we started in Lincoln in right as COVID started. So our first year was when COVID started. So what is that, 2020? Yeah, and so we have only done the City Nature Challenge virtually here in Lincoln. And then last year we added, there was interest across the state, so we added 3 more cities or areas, and then there is interest in a couple more cities. So I know Hastings, there was somebody in Hastings who wanted to be involved. Chadron has expressed interest. So there's definitely interest in growing more.
Well, yeah.
You don't have to go through Game and Parks to start a city with City Nature Challenge. You just have to go through the global organizers in order to do that. And
that's really exciting.
Yeah.
Hey, Alie.
Yeah.
This is Rosanne.
Hey.
How come you don't have, if you're in one of the participating cities, how come you don't have to do the identification? Who does the identification on the back end then?
Great question. So the identification on iNaturalist is done as this huge community. So you have this huge community of naturalists, and so there's people on there that are content experts who go through and identify things. There's also just amateur naturalists who are just interested, who go through and identify things. Here in Nebraska, we have all of these cities participating. So we have a collaborative, and the collaborative organizes ID parties, and we try to utilize those ID parties in order to do more identifications. So those happen that week following the CNC. So the 2nd through the 5th, I think, is when we're going to be having them this year. But it's really a lot of people participate in the identification, not just people from Nebraska. So does that answer your question, Rosanne? Sorry.
No, that totally answered it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay. So we're going to move on to celebrating urban nature. So I'm going to talk about 2 of the programs that we are currently doing that's really focused on just celebrating the nature in our urban areas. The first one is Neighborhood Nature Fest. So this one is coming soon this year. We'll be doing this program thanks to a Watchable Wildlife grant that we received. So the Neighborhood Nature Fest, the whole idea behind it was our educator Grace learned about an event in another state where they did this swift viewing, and it was this big deal in the city where everybody would go out and see the swifts coming to roost. And we have that here in Lincoln. We have a swift colony that Rusa. Do you remember the school at Rusa and Amber?
I can't remember exactly. It's a middle school here in Lincoln, though.
I can't either. If anybody on here knows which school that is, but there's a local school. And so we're like, wouldn't it be cool to have this wildlife viewing festival essentially around this phenomenon happening right here in our city? And so that idea grew, and now we're having one up in Omaha. And earlier when I said we're expanding our partnership with Girls Inc., this is another way we're going to engage with that Girls Inc. group that we have been working with. So far we just work with Girls Inc., the girls themselves during their programming, and this festival will give us the opportunity to do outreach to the families of the girls. So we're going to be able to interact not just with the girls themselves, but the rest of the family, so the adults, the siblings, that sort of thing. So Girls Inc. is going to be one of the partners at the festival, hosting booths, and then we're also going to have other community partners talking about everything from bats to pollinators and other interesting nature things as well. So the one up in Omaha, since it lines up really nicely with Pollinator Week, will be focused on pollinators a little more. The one here in Lincoln, we are hoping to do that swift viewing still, and that one's going to be even more focused on birds. Yeah. Whoa, sorry about that. Just flash forward really quick. The next one I wanted to talk about was Monarchs and Migration. So this is when we started last year. It's a September celebration up in Omaha. And it's really focused on tying together the monarch migration with Latino art and culture. So the thought behind this program, the goal of it was to have a bilingual event that tied together Latino Heritage Month with the monarch migration, and then also monarch tagging, so community science that happens around monarchs. And this event last year, we did it for the first time. It went pretty well, but lots of ideas of how to change it and improve it for this coming year as well. So yeah, any questions about either of those two events, kind of the plans with Neighborhood Nature Fest or continuing with the Monarchs and Migrations event?
And I think, Alie, these are just both two examples and case studies that you're kind of presenting as potential ways that we can engage, with, celebrating urban biodiversity in urban areas. So I'm sure there's other ways too, but these are two really exciting and ways that we've been able to do in our building forward. So
right, and so the idea behind here is just to really hone in and celebrate what people are seeing every day. And sometimes we see things and then we kind of I don't want to say glaze over, but we kind of forget what we're looking at. So we see the birds in our backyards and we no longer think they're special, and we see the flowers in our neighborhood, but maybe we don't take a closer look. So these are two examples of how we're really trying to hone in and look and observe and help people celebrate what's around them and the nature they can find in their city.
that's great.
Okay, the next part of the presentation, I really wanted to take some time to just open to discussion. So I have two discussion questions for us to start with. Feel free to unmute if you want to speak or pop your thoughts into the chat. The first thing I wanted to talk about just as a group are what are some other ways we can connect to people, or we can connect people to urban biodiversity. So we talked about some of the programs that we do, some community science, but what are other thoughts that you all have about connecting people to this topic?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Lasagna. One of the ways that I think would be a good way to connect people to urban biodiversity is maybe doing backyard foraging, learning about some of the herbs that grow all around us that are good for food and medicine.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So talking about just kind of some of are you talking about like some of the like dandelions and nettle and that sort of thing that that is a resource
Right,
for
and like
people.
Lamb's Quarter and, because Lamb's Quarter is a perfect example that can be used just like spinach. So alternate sources of things that are just growing around us. And yes, dandelion definitely having good medicinal purposes, but also tells you a lot about your soil. So learning about the different weeds and things that are growing, what it tells us about our soils, and then that are also good for medicine.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool idea. And I like that you're talking about tying it into, the soil and the ecological health as well, and then the health of people. Any other thoughts?
Someone mentioned if there are some other generic festivals, you may put up a stand where you also talk about biodiversity.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And one way we've done that in the past with our family nature nights that we hosted last year was to have a booth where we talked about biodiversity and iNaturalist and teaching people how to use that, and we did a lot of macro dipping with it because we were normally near a source of water. So I think that that's a perfect idea. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Any other thoughts?
Another one, this is Lasagna, just as I'm looking at your mushrooms, learning about mushrooms and dying with them. So learning wildcrafting ideals. So again, that's looking at nature, using nature to actually do some of the common everyday things, 'cause you can dye, make natural dyes with a lot of plants. So, and a lot of people don't know that, or things like that.
Well, Sonia, I'm just throwing it out there. This year for Easter, my son and I did natural dyes with plants for our Easter eggs, and it was not only super cool, but it was such a fun kind of science experiment that we did together. And we did something similar to what you're speaking to. So that was really fun. I like that idea.
Yeah, I do too. I like the idea of combining the art too with nature. And that was one of the focuses of the Monarchs and Migration event. We had a local Latino artist come out and he does a lot of work with monarchs and tying it to migration of both animals and people. And so he came out and did some art with the participants of the festival. But I love the idea of that wild crafting like you're talking about. That's really cool.
One of the things with your butterfly, sorry, you got me
Yeah.
started,
No,
was
I'm happy. I love this discussion.
learning about the milkweed. Milkweed, you can actually make crochet items. Also learning about milkweed itself is very medicinal, pleurisy root, and that's all tied with the butterfly. So maybe incorporating that kind of information so they learn not only about the butterfly, but why those specific plants are useful to the butterfly and to humans.
Yeah, absolutely.
She's got all the ideas today.
She
This is
does.
fantastic.
We need to have a
Thanks,
chat
Lasonia.
sometime.
Yeah.
Talk about this more.
Sarah mentioned TV, radio, podcasts that target those audiences and excite about urban biodiversity. It's a great idea.
Yeah, I agree, Sarah. And I think that's all of these ideas, you're hitting different types of people too in different interest areas, and you're still tying in nature, but through these different mechanisms, which I think are great. So art, radio, podcasts, you might hit different people with all of those. Does anybody have suggestions for podcasts or radio programs that speak to urban nature, biodiversity?
Oh, good question, Alie. Share some if you know them. Also, Sarah mentioned booths at farmers markets. That's excellent. That's a really good idea.
Yeah, that's a good one too. Or just your community events in general, having, even if you don't necessarily think like, oh, this is, like, is this my target audience? You're always trying to look for ways to engage new folks. So, Lincoln has plenty of free festivals in other areas due to, like, Streets Alive is a really good one here in Lincoln. That's a good idea, Sarah. Any other thoughts for this one? Other ways to connect people to urban biodiversity? Oh, thanks, Toby. Toby mentioned or put in the chat a podcast from the Nebraska statewide Arboretum. So that's very exciting. I'll look at that later, Toby. Thank you. And Lasagna also mentioned 4-H engagement. Now we're getting in, 2 votes for ologies with Alie Ward. If you haven't checked out that podcast before, that's a really great one to tie in. Lots of different scientific nature-based topics. Also Facebook groups where you can share photos from anything from mushrooms to bees, flowers, that sort of thing, and just build that community like we're talking about. So community isn't always a location. Sometimes it's a group with shared interests. So thanks for that.
Something a little similar in those veins, Alie, is another program our division has started spearheading last year is community kayak cleanup events. And so just kind of, so we're not only celebrating the nature in urban areas, but we're also allowing people and participants to actually partake in kind of better stewardship of them. And that was really exciting and really successful last year. A lot of really great comments from the folks who came out either with their kayaks or they came out, they've never kayaked before and we had kayaks for them, where they said, this is really cool, this is exciting. Next time I go out to these spaces, I'm gonna bring a plastic sack so I can just pick up trash along the way. So that was a cool, another kind of successful urban nature event that we did last year.
I like that because you can tie in the urban nature and the wildlife, but also that stewardship piece is really nice as well. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next question. What are other ways we can connect people? Whoops, that's the same one. Hold on. Sorry about that. How can we better incorporate biodiversity data into our work? So this is maybe more geared towards if we have any biologists on or game and parks folks or other conservation agencies or organizations. So how can we better incorporate biodiversity data into our work?
I know that there is a program, it's an application actually through, I think it's NOAA, and it has to do with litter pickup, like where things are located. And so it kind of helped with the urban, so you were able to collect trash in different locations, take pictures, and then kind of locate. It was like a locator, but it kept track of data, but it was showing where you could contribute to the environmental aspect of things because of the fact that it would go into the ocean. So it was like helping with surface runoff and things like that by being able to pick up and then track what you were doing. And it's kind of a global thing too.
That sounds really cool. I'll have to look into what that is called.
I can send it to you.
Thank you. I'll put my email in the chat for you. Any other ideas about how we can better incorporate biodiversity data into our work?
Well, I think the more robust collection of data that we have across the state can help inform, from my perspective with the Arboretum, where, there might be some areas that don't have as many butterflies recorded or, caterpillars. And then that kind of gives us some insight in okay, let's really focus on putting more pollinator plants and native species in that area. So I think collectively, the more data we get across the board, we can inform each other and all these different conservation organizations on how better to do our work.
Yeah, so kind of using it to look for those gaps, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Melissa also said community science groups could try to document target species such as invasive species. That's another really good idea. So I know there's programs like Tic Tac Go, which is a community science effort from the university looking to monitor tick populations across the state, especially starting, a few years ago. So the thought is there's going to be more tick species moving into the state with things like climate change. And so being able to track that change, so getting some baseline data and seeing how it changes over time. So yeah, that project's called, oh, Amber put it in the chat, she's on it. Yeah, so that's one I know is already doing species, not necessarily invasive species yet, but that's a great idea, Melissa. Thanks for sharing.
Alie, I'm curious, as people are maybe contributing more thoughts, what has been maybe last year's City Nature Challenge or in previous years, has there ever been discoveries of, threatened and endangered species or data on T&E species during City Nature Challenge?
Yeah,
both
so
globally or in Nebraska?
So last year globally, there were over, I think it was 2,000. Let me go back to that slide really quick. I think it was 2,244 rare and endangered species were documented across the globe.
Wow.
That graphic might be a little hard to see, but it just goes through some of them across the globe. And then here in Nebraska, we do look at what we compare like our species list against our T and our threatened and endangered species list, our tier 1 and tier 2 species. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I could certainly get them to you of, which species we're finding during those events.
But I guess in the big pictures, they are found during these events.
They are found, and not just the City Nature Challenge, but also our bio blitzes that we have across the state. We've found new county records and things like that during those events, which is really
awesome.
cool.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Okay, just want to give one more second here in case anybody has anything else to add to incorporating biodiversity data into our work. Okay, so at this point, I just want to open it up to questions or discussions. What about the topic of urban biodiversity and connecting people to it interests you? In what ways are you currently doing this, or in what ways would you like to? We just have a few more minutes, so I really want to open it up to discussion. I know we're like all with our cameras off and muted, and that's how I tend to be too during these, but I'm going to encourage some conversation today.
Alie, do you mind, purely selfish reason, because I had a thought, can you go back to your slide on place-based education?
Yeah. All right, we'll get there.
It's okay. You've got a great presentation.
There we go.
Thank you so much. Something that I saw here on the slide really resonated with me, and it's something that I feel like our division and environmental educators are trying to do often, but I've never seen it written out in this way, is reducing the idea that nature is somewhere else, somewhere we go to and then we leave. I really like that a lot, especially in this topic of urban nature and urban biodiversity, because if we don't feel connected to it, if we don't feel like we're part of this natural community, even the nature in our urban areas, it just is such an abstract idea, especially for young kids, when it's you have to be a little bit older to kind of be thinking about those abstract thoughts and concepts. And so like, if they're connected to it physically and understand that nature is all around them, their school, their backyard, even their patio, whatever it may be, I think that's I don't know, it's just such a good message, and it was cool to read that here. Oh, it looks like Chelsea said I had the exact same thought, Amber. Yeah,
I think also when you're talking about getting different audiences or new audiences involved, it's also the question of who nature is for. So I feel like if we're not familiar with it, or we don't have those experiences to connect with nature around us, it's going to be a lot harder to have those big experiences later, because we might not feel like, we're a part of that community that goes out and does these things. So I'm not part of this, community that goes out and bird watches. That's not for me, sort of thing. So when we can eliminate some of that by doing the place-based education, by doing some of these educational efforts around, people's yards and homes, then I think we can grow to that. We can grow to those bigger experiences.
Yeah. That's so cool. Thank you. Oh, Jim mentioned, good presentation. Your efforts to introduce participants to the outdoors where they live is commendable. Removing the perceived barrier that one must travel to a destination to experience nature is critical. The gateway to the outdoors can begin in their own backyard. Well done. That's excellent. Yep, that's great. Thanks, Jim. Any other
I
thoughts?
agree with that. I actually don't live in Nebraska now, but I am a part of Nebraska's new legacy conservation program.
Oh,
I live in Iowa, but one of the things that I started doing, I raised Angora rabbits. And so rabbits and worms and manure and soil has a huge connection as far as composting and things like that, something that everybody can do. But one of the things that I noticed is that soil, for example, we don't think about the diversity in soil and how important soil is in regards to our food and things like that, you know, and being able to look at soil under a microscope and realizing that soil is living, you know, that if it's not, doesn't have all its components, then it can't do the work. And so that's biodiversity. Everybody has soil around them, and knowing that there's life in it and all of the pieces that contribute. The animals play a role, the birds play a role, you know, the caterpillars, the things that we think are less important are all important to that biodiversity. So being able to recognize what's in there or what's not there, you know, like they said, the herbs, certain herbs, dandelions will tell you what's in the soil. Burdock will tell you what's in your soil, what's not in your soil. And so all of those things are really important to look at. And if you can educate and share that with your children or with the children, then they can know, you know, the bees and all of that, that those things have to be close. And if that's close, then you can kind of look at what's around you.
that's good.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you, Lasagna, for bringing, that's like a full circle right there.
Yeah, it
Thanks
is.
for bringing it full circle for us. Brianna said there's a cool nationwide project called Homegrown National Park that promotes planting native plants in your backyard. And then everyone involved adds that plot to a map. Their mission is to regenerate biodiversity and ecosystem function. And I will
Super
be
cool.
clicking on this link.
Yeah,
That's really
definitely.
cool. Thanks for sharing that, Bri. Okay. Well, we don't have any other thoughts or things we would like to discuss. I vote we leave a little early today.
I think that's great. And I just want to say I really appreciate all the comments and discussion. This was a really engaging lunch and learn. I love when not only we learn from the presenter, but we also learn from each other in this platform. It's really exciting. So thank you, everybody. And huge thank you to Alie for your expertise in this, your passion, your dedication, and all the work that you do in bringing this important subject to light here, at least on behalf of Game and Parks and in Nebraska. So thanks, Alie.
Yeah, of course. Thank you all for being here and thank you for sharing your thoughts as well. Bye.
Bye. I will be sending an evaluation and resource email with this recording as well, if you'd like to pass this along to those who might have missed it today. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.